So today we're going to talk about one variable inequalities. We've been talking about these one variable equations, but now we're going to talk about these inequalities. With the inequalities, you have four symbols. You have the less than, greater than, less than or equal to, and I'm going to move that because I need that somewhere else. Less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. Okay? With these two symbols, these are going to be your open circles, and I'll show you what that means when we're talking about graphs in a second. Over here, these are all going to be your closed circles. Closed circles. Okay? So when we're graphing inequalities, we're going to use a number line. So let's make our number line here. So we have a number line, and we're going to use these number lines. And then we're going to make these 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5. So what it means with the open and closed circle. Looking at this symbol, we have x is greater than 4. So looking down here, it says open or closed. At the number 4, that's where the circle goes. So when I mean open circle, it's going to look something like that. It's going to be an open circle. And do you see how this arrow here, this is kind of like an arrow, it points to this direction? Well, that's this direction that we are going to shade. So that means that I have to shade this direction as well. Okay? So looking at the second one, what that has a line underneath it, so that means at 4 it's going to be shaded in. And so this one is pointed to the right, so that means I'm going to shade to the right from that circle. Okay. This one, see how it's an open circle, it doesn't have a line underneath, that means it's going to be open at the number 4. And you see how it's pointed this direction to the left? That means I'm going to shade everything to the left. And here, again, that has the line underneath it, so we're going to shade that circle in. And again, see how it's that arrow is pointing to the left? That means I'm going to shade everything to the left of that circle. Okay? So let's do some examples. When you're solving these, you're solving them just like equations. There's only a couple differences, and I'll explain those when we get to them. So on this one, it says y plus 3 is less than 7. So to move the 3, we're going to have to subtract 3. Whatever I do one side, I'll have to do the other. So our y comes down, and it's just going to be y is less than 4. So 4, 3, 2, that should be a 5, 2. Okay. Again, no line underneath the symbol, so that means it's an open circle at 4. And see how that arrow here is pointed to the left? That means I'm going to shade everything to the left. Okay. Now the second one, we're going to subtract 10 from both sides. Okay, the a is going to come down. It's going to be a is greater than or equal to 2. So we see how there's a line underneath that, so that means I'm going to shade in at 2. And you see how that arrow is pointed to the right, so that means I'm going to shade everything to the right of that circle. Okay, the next one. Remember, with fractions, to get rid of our fraction, we want to multiply everything by the biggest denominator. So the biggest denominator here is 14, so I'm going to multiply this by 14, this by 14, and this by 14. So what I'm going to get is I'm going to get 14d, that should be a 14, plus 56 over 7 is greater than 14 over 14. So what that allows us to do is simplify those fractions. Okay, so we're going to get 14d plus 56 divided by 7 is 8. 14 divided by 14 is 1. Okay. I'm going to subtract that 8 from both sides. I'm going to come below here. So I get 14d is greater than negative 7. I'm going to divide both sides by 14. And you get d is greater than negative 7 over 14. But the cool thing is that 7 goes into both of these. So it's actually d is greater than negative 1/2. So we're going to draw our number line. Okay. And it's an open circle, but at negative 1/2, well, negative 1/2 is halfway between 0 and 1, negative 1. And you see how that arrow is pointed to the right. That means I got to shade everything to the right of that circle. And there we go. And the last one deals with decimals here. Decimals don't change anything. We're still going to subtract by 2.8 on both sides. So we get W is less than or equal to 13.9 minus 2.8 is 11.1. And you notice that there is a line underneath that circle, so it means I got to shade it in. And you see how that is pointed to the left, that arrow, so we're going to shade to the left. And for the next few examples, we're not going to graph them, we're just going to solve them. Okay, so here, we're just going to divide by 2. Nothing changes. So we get m is greater than or equal to 3. On this one, we're going to divide by 4. So we get a is less than negative 3. Nothing has changed. On this one, we're going to divide by 7. And remember, if it doesn't actually come out, we're just going to leave it as a fraction of 2 over 7. And then on this one, you see that that G right here is on the right-hand side. We're actually going to write it on the left. And to do that, you're just going to write what it says. Now, when you do that, you see that sign in the middle. It flips the other direction. So now when we solve it, we're going to divide it by 18, divide by 18. And we get G is greater than or equal to 9 over 18. But we know that 9 goes into both 9 and 18. So we get G is greater than or equal to 1/2. Okay, here's where it's slightly different. So the rule here is if the number in front of the variable is negative, then we have to flip the sign. So what I mean by that, see here how this negative, there's a negative 5 in front of that t. So when we divide by negative 5 on both sides, these go away. You're left with t. On this side, it's going to be negative 11. But this sign in the middle flips the other way. That's what happens there. So again, let's look at b here. We're dividing by negative 9. So we're going to get x. We're going to get 8. But because that 9 was negative in front of that x, this sign flips the other way. So let's do it again. This one's going to be negative 63. So our n comes down. We're going to have 7 over negative 63. But because that 63 was negative, it's going to go the other way. Then this one, because the 7 goes into both, we're going to get n is greater than 1 over negative 9. And then on this one, remember we talked about it, this k is first on the right, so we need it to be on the left. So we're going to write it on the left. And when that happens, the sign flips. And then when we get rid of that negative 12 by dividing, we're going to k, remember, and this is going to be negative 12 over here. This sign in the middle flips because that number in front of that letter was negative. All right, we're going to graph and do a couple more quickly here. The top ones, we're not going to graph. I'm not going to graph them. If you need help with graphing, please refer further in the video. Okay? So first step here, we're going to add 8 to both sides. So we get 3x is less than 9. We're going to divide both sides by 3. Was the number in front of x negative? The answer was no, so we're just going to do x is greater than 3. Nothing changes. Remember, on this one, we have letters on both sides of the equal sign, so you take the one furthest to the right and move it to the left. So this is 5v on the right, so we're going to put a negative 5v underneath. So we get negative 2v, those cancel out, is less than or equal to 18. Then we're going to divide by negative 2, and we get v and negative 9, but because that number in front of the letter was negative, the sign flips the other way. Now we have a couple more we're going to solve. This one we're going to subtract 7 from both sides. We get negative x is greater than or equal to, that's 24 minus 7, which would be 17. Remember, there's an imaginary 1 there, so we're going to divide both sides by negative 1. And because that number in front of the x was negative, the sign will flip the other way. On this one, we first have to get this x to the other side, so we're going to rewrite it with the x on the other side, and remember when we do that, the sign flips the other direction. Then we're going to solve, so we're going to subtract 2 from both sides. So I get negative 3x is greater than 60. Then we're going to divide both sides by negative 3. And because the number in front of that x was negative, we're going to flip that sign the other way. And these are our last two. Okay, so let's go over them. So first thing we got to do is distribute. So it's going to give me 2y minus 6. Okay, the plus 7 comes down, the 21 comes down. Okay, we can combine like terms here. Negative 6 plus 7 will give me positive 1. We're going to subtract 1 from both sides. So I get 2y is less than 20. We're going to divide both sides by 20. And because the number in front of y was not negative, we don't flip the sign, so y is less than 10. I'll go ahead and graph this one. Remember, open circle because there's no line underneath it. And this tells me that it's shading to the left, so we're going to shade everything to the left. And the last one over here, we're going to distribute first, so that's 2 times x and 2 times 11, so 2x plus 22. Greater than sign stays the same. On the other side, it's going to be negative 3x minus 18. We have 2 letters here, so we have to move the one furthest on the right to the left, so we're going to add 3x. So we get 5x plus 22 greater than negative 18. I'm going to subtract 22 from both sides. I'm going to go below the graph here. So I get 5x is less than negative 40. And we'll just divide both sides by 5. So we get x is less than negative 8. And then so we're going to graph it, negative 8, negative 7, negative 9. It's going to be an open circle because there's no line underneath it, and it's going to shade to the right because that arrow here is pointed to the right. And there you go. So that's solving one-step inequality.